Talk about when everything just burnt to the ground for you.
Yeah, sure. In that new business that I started, we went from 0 to 1.5 million in under 12 months. We realized he'd been coaching the client on how to get out of the contract so he could have it himself. It was like this perfect storm of foundations cracking around me because I hadn't built the business the right way. Because at this point, I now hated construction and I hated my industry. And I just thought, why am I doing this at all?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Marketing Without Rules, the show where we inspire business owners by bringing on guests who exemplify the hunter mindset. They make moves, they color outside the lines, and they have found creative ways to channel the attention of their community into currency. This show is sponsored by Blue Crocus Solutions, a web design and SEO agency focused on helping home service companies. I am your host, Lewis Vandervalk, and today I have the awesome pleasure of chatting with Greg Wilkes. So Greg is a multi-award-winning construction business coach, author of Building Your Future, and he's the host of the Develop Your Construction Business podcast. After scaling his own construction company past the £1 million mark and experiencing the chaos that often follows, he's made it his mission to help other builders break that ceiling without burning out. He shows trade and construction business owners how to move from busy but broke to truly profitable. The dream for all of us when we started business, really. Building businesses that run without them being in the day-to-day. Today, he's helping leaders across the UK and Australia systematize, scale, and finally reclaim their time, freedom, and sanity. Greg, welcome to the show. Excited to have you here.
Hey, Lewis. Thanks for having me. Yeah, excited to be on.
This is gonna be a good one. And I want to start kind of back at the beginning for you. And I think that it will lend some gravitas to what we talk about as we go through the show. Talk about when everything just burnt to the ground for you.
Yeah, sure. So I had a pretty successful construction business back in the UK. We were growing quite rapidly. So, managed to scale it to 7 figures. That was like the first hurdle. And then I bought my business partner out. And I was then left on my own trying to scale this business on my own, which was good. It was exciting and sort of the
right.
Yeah, unshackled. So it was good fun, but obviously a lot of pressure as well because I put myself in a little bit of debt to buy my business partner out. There was no relying on anyone else. It was all down to me. So really wanted to scale it up and go for it. So we did that. We were doing quite well, and we were basically on track for hitting about £5 million turnover in a year, which was pretty exciting. But the problem was we'd scaled so quickly that we'd really outpaced the systems and processes that come with, having a business of that size. So we were adding the wrong sort of people into the business. That was probably one of the first big mistakes. Lots of wrong people coming on. We were bringing on so much work that actually we were churning through it so quickly. We didn't really have a big pipeline of work in the future. So every month was just this big scramble to try and find £400,000 worth of work just to keep the lights on. And it was, a lot of pressure. So cracks started appearing, mistakes were being made on site, which meant we were losing our reputation. So customers were complaining. We had to be fair, we had sort of solicitors getting involved with customers we were falling out with potentially. And then we just had some really unscrupulous customers as well, where it wasn't our fault and things were happening. Like we had a customer that actually died halfway through a project, which was
that's very unscrupulous.
Yeah, how dare they? And, that was terrible. So the customer died, and then the wife was advised that she could actually get out of this contract if she wanted to, because we'd signed it with the husband and she could benefit from it. And they owed us, I can't remember what it was, it was a 6-figure sum. It was a big amount. And we were told by a solicitor that you've got a real problem here because you're going to end up in a big legal battle with this wife. And she's just gone through husband dying. Do you want to do that? So we pretty much had to write that off. And all of this was all happening at the same time. So
it always does.
Yeah, it was like this perfect storm of foundations cracking around me because I hadn't built the business the right way. The economy turned slightly on us where, all of a sudden we were bringing projects on no problem. And then all of a sudden it was like the lights went out overnight and we couldn't land a project to save our lives. And that was pretty much the writing on the wall for us, really. And then I remember going to see an accountant who advised me to talk to a liquidator And the liquidator just looked at the business and looked at the numbers, and he said, Greg, like, I know you've been trying to turn this around, but you're actually insolvent. He goes, you shouldn't be trading. Like, you like, if you actually start taking more projects on, because you end up robbing Peter to pay Paul. You take on a project to try and cover the losses of the last project. He said, if you do that, it's actually going to be illegal. So you need to shut this business down ASAP. And it was like, I can't believe this. This business I've built up over 10, 15 years was about to collapse overnight. And, we had such a good reputation up until that point that it just felt a disaster. I felt like a failure as a person.
Complete gut punch.
Yeah. I felt, because I've spoken about this before, but I had tied a lot of my identity to the success I had in business. And then all of a sudden now I'm absolutely a useless business person and I'm about to fail. I thought, what does that mean about me? What about all these people I'm employing? I had a massive team that were relying on me to pay their rent and their mortgages, and they had their own families. And now I felt responsible for them, and that was all going to go overnight. So, at the time, it was just an absolute disaster, and something I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. It was very stressful.
Super stressful. What if you could go back and look at, because I think that the story really can hit a chord with a lot of people. We hopefully don't get to that point, but we've certainly been there where everything seems like it's going wrong. Customers aren't paying, or someone charges back, or you name it, right? And you talked about kind of being out over your skis a little bit there, growing a little bit faster than the systems could sustain. Could you get a little granular with maybe 2 or 3 specific systems that cause those cracks? Because it's, we can all talk in business platitudes here, but if we could kind of get granular for the listeners.
Yeah, I think the biggest failure was probably the people failure, where we didn't have the right system of onboarding people the right way, hiring the right way. Because we grew so fast, it was literally like, who can we get? A bum on a seat. We just need to get this project over the line. So, we were bringing on, project managers, people to help us with marketing, all sorts of people. And I mean, just to tell you some stories of what happened. So one person we brought on board interviewed amazing. She was a marketing executive, and we just wanted to up our marketing game. She come on board, interviewed amazingly, and where we went wrong.
She sold you.
Yeah, she sold us. She was incredible. And then when she come on board, the first day she was there, started off the morning, she was great, started off absolutely fine. And then as the day went on, she just got worse and worse. Like, her performance was getting worse. She wasn't making much sense when she was talking. And I was sitting next to her to onboard her. And I just thought, this girl that started at 8 a.m. is not the same person at like 1 p.m. And I thought, there's something really off here. I actually thought she was on drugs. So I called her out about 2 p.m. I sent a message to my team, the other directors and managers in there, and I said, are you noticing something wrong with this lady? And they couldn't quite see it because I was sitting next to her. They went, no, not really. Maybe you should have a chat with her. So anyway, I pulled her downstairs and said, look, is there something I need to know? You've got to be really careful with HR, with how you approach these things. I just said, is there something I need to know? Like, you're not like speaking properly. You're not as coherent. Something's not right. And then she really attacked me. She was like, and how dare you, and blah, 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 all this stuff. So I was like, okay, this isn't going well. So anyway, it was day 1. So I thought, she's not going to get into day 2, but I've got a right to sack her. So at the end of the day, I let her go home. And then I thought, right, I'm going to have to ring her up tonight and just say this isn't working. And one of my other managers walked past her car and saw her passed out over the steering wheel. And he's like, what is this? So he opened the door, the passenger side door, to see if she was all right. And there was just all these empty mini wine bottles all over the floor. And basically, she just drinking herself into oblivion the whole day. So she was an alcoholic. And it was a disaster. So then she tried to drive off, and he had to grab her keys, and the police were called. And it was terrible. And then she was calling me racist and sexist and all this stuff because we'd sacked her and she was being abused. So we just had all this stuff going on. I'm like, what is this? I mean, that was just one example. And then another person we brought on board was a project manager. And interestingly enough, where we went wrong on this is I read a book that said, when you hire, don't hire the same people as you. Like, what you'll do when you're hiring is you'll hire people that match your personality because you like them and you get on with them. It said, try hiring someone a little bit different that can bring, something else to the business. So I thought, okay, that's good. So this guy come in, interviewed, and straight away on the interview, I thought, this guy's unusual. He's like a bit of an eccentric, not quite sure about him, but I had this book in the back of my mind. Thought, oh, maybe he'll offer something different. He'd come from a huge company called Multiplex, which is a massive building company here in Australia and in the UK. So I thought, maybe he's going to bring this corporate mindset to our small business. Anyway, he come on board, we hired him, put him on this big project. And as soon as he started, within a month or two, the client just turned on us and we're like, what is going on? Like the build's going really well, but the client's just gone from this really nice lady to turning on us, and we couldn't quite work it out. And then I got this email through where I was accidentally in copy and I shouldn't have been. And he basically emailed this client and he was talking to her about these contract clauses and things. And I thought, why is he telling her about these contract clauses? This doesn't make sense. And basically he accidentally copied me in on this thing. So went straight to my IT provider and said, look, I need to look at his work emails and have a look at what's going on here. And then we realized he'd been coaching the client on how to get out of the contract so he could have it himself.
No
and this was
way.
a £500,000 contract. And it was just a disaster. So now I've sacked him. I'm on a HR legal battle with him because he's been sacked. I'm then in a legal battle with the client because she's trying to get out of the 500K contract. And now we've lost the 500K project as well, that we can't deliver. So I think that out of all the things that went wrong, one of the biggest problems was we didn't have a system in place for hiring the right people, onboarding them the right way. They weren't coming in and fitting our culture. That we'd sort of lost that, what our culture was, just because we were hiring anyone just to get through the work. So that was probably, if we were going to get really practical, I'd say that's, a granular thing that went wrong in a big way.
Well, I think we can talk about platitudes all day, but I love those stories because we've all had or if we haven't, we probably will have some version of it unless we can get a hold of our systems. I've certainly had my fair share of crazy employee stories in the agency here. One more, I appreciate you humoring the woe is me stories here because it just brings the audience in. One more maybe anecdote around systems in the field that really were kind of breaking as you guys scaled, and then we'll move into how we can actually fix this and what you do to help people with that.
Yeah, I guess another one, not as major, but this cost us a lot of money. And this is a real practical fix, which builders get wrong, is we were pricing incorrectly on our project. So I don't know whether this will translate to your audience, but there's a big difference between margin and markup that a lot of businesses don't actually understand the difference between the two. And it can cost you, when you're dealing with like £1 million contracts, it can cost you tens of thousands of pounds in lost income. So we had a huge project that we took on, and the project manager who was responsible for pricing all the extra work didn't understand the difference between margin and markup. And so we were pricing at a 30%. We thought we were pricing at a 30% profit margin, and he was pricing at a 30% markup, which meant, I can't remember what that profit margin that means. It means like 20% or 22% or something when you work it back.
Can you just in layman's terms talk about the difference here quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Between markup and margin for people?
Yes. So let's say, for example, you had a project that was £100,000. So you know that it's going to cost you £100,000 on labour and materials for you to deliver this project, and then you make zero money. So the project's £100,000, you priced it at that. If you were pricing via markup, you might say, I need to add a 30% markup to this project. So now the project that should be £100,000 to break even, you price that at £130,000 with a 30% markup. Yeah. But what then happens is that isn't your margin. You think you've got a 30% margin, but actually 30% on 130,000 now isn't enough. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but what it will mean is you actually, the profit margin you get off of that when you do a markup is much less. It'll be like 20% or 21%.
Well, and you've got all your admin and SG&A costs and all of that on top of it.
Yeah, but not even that. It's just the percentage difference. So now when you're working out margin, you're now working it out on £130,000. And then you're
starting from the wrong end.
Exactly that. Yeah. Yes. So that was a huge problem. And I think like a lot of builders, and this will go for most businesses, they just don't understand their numbers. And although we were sort of over our numbers, what we hadn't done is we hadn't trained our team to understand numbers properly as well. So that cost us a lot of money, not understanding that fully. Lots of other things, other things that went wrong in a practical way with contracts. We didn't understand contractual terms. And in the building industry, you've got to be all over your commercial contracts to make sure that you're locking those in. We made those mistakes. So yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about the mistakes. There's many of them.
Yeah, we all want to hit revenue, right? There's that, $1 million. There's that $10 million. There's, those are some common ones. I mean, first you start, you're like, if I can hit a $10,000 a month, that's incredible, right? And that's kind of the first big milestone. And then you're like, man, like a $50,000 month, and then 100, and then on to 1 million, right? But without systems, there's just such a huge gap there. So you did end up starting again, and you rebuilt it differently. Talk to us
Yeah.
about that, and you've got a framework for that too. But kind of there's the working in, not on the business. There's systems and reporting. There's your USP. Pick a few from there, and then we'll get into your developed framework and really drill down into that for people.
Yeah, sure. So just to explain why I started again, because I was a bit of a crossroads when the business had gone, that I had real mixed feelings over that, on like, did I even want to do this again? Or is this actually my clean break out of this industry? Because at this point, I now hated construction and I hated my industry. And I just thought, why am I doing this at all?
There was everything wrong in your life at that point.
Yeah, I just really wasn't enjoying it. And it was so stressful. And I thought, what's the point? So then I had mixed emotions, because I thought, well, this is my clean break. I can now just completely move away from this. I'd lost a lot of money in the process. I had a nice car and everything I had to sell to sort of pay debts off and stuff. And it was horrible. So I thought, right, let's get out of this completely. But the other thing inside me was thinking, actually, like, I know that although there was things going wrong with that business, I was really successful to get it to that point. Like, there was a lot that I was doing right to get it to this level. It's just that there was cracks appearing. So inside me, I felt that I had unfinished business there, because I knew I could make it a success, but I hadn't quite achieved it. So I had this internal battle going on with, what should I actually do? And I spoke to a mentor at the time, a guy called Daniel Priestley, who's,
oh, wow.
Yeah, he's a really switched on guy. He's sort of gone a bit nuts on his podcast at the moment with, Alex Hormozy and all that he's been on podcasts with, but very clued up and clever guy. So he just sort of said to me, look, Greg, if you can turn this around, and I think you can, because he'd been talking to me about the business up until that point, and he'd seen what I'd done. He goes, I know you can turn this around. It will open up other opportunities for you later on in life, because because I'd always told him I wanted to get into coaching, but he goes, you can't get into coaching with a business that's just failed. So he goes, you've got to be able to turn it around to be able to do anything else going forward. So I went, okay. And he goes, and if I were you, he goes, I would take your time, document the process, work out what you've done wrong, do it all differently, document it all, write a book, and then just see where it goes. So I thought that was a good idea. So I did. I read at the time, loads of books. I'd say it wasn't hundreds of books, but it was so many books on business development, mindset, all that sort of stuff, and worked out exactly where I'd gone wrong and what I needed to put in place to do it. And then I documented the whole thing on how I changed it. And then that new business that I started, we went from 0 to 1.5 million in under 12 months. So it was pretty quick to get to that level. But more importantly than the revenue, it was that this was built the right way. I had so much more time. I was earning more than I'd ever earned before. Kept a really lean team. The systems were right. Everything was right about it. And I was enjoying it again. I thought, actually, this is great. And then I thought, well, from here, what is really my passion? Where do I want to go? Do I want to carry on building for clients or do my own thing? And I'd always wanted to get into property development for myself and be my own client. So because I've made a ton of money then in that first year, I used that to buy my own properties, and then made even more money on property development, made some really good deals. And then I was living like my dream life. I thought, actually, this is really good. This is exactly what I've always ever wanted. In the meantime, because I was doing property development, I had more time for myself. So I started writing the book, wrote the book, put it out there of what had happened. And the book was an Amazon #1 bestseller. And I was just getting really good feedback on, like, actually, there's no book out there for builders in the UK at the time. I think it was literally one of the first books that had been printed, like this practical way of building a company. And so I spoke to Daniel Priestley again and sort of said, well, what do you think I should do from here? Like, it's going really well. The book's really taken off. And he said, well, you've got to start coaching now and put this into proper frameworks and whatever else. And in a way, I'd wish I'd put the frameworks more into the book. I did do a sort of framework in the book, but it's not the framework I follow now. Now I've been doing coaching for a while. I've sort of honed it down a bit. But to answer your first question, there are 5 parts to that framework that I now know work really well. And that is plan. You need to have I'll just give you it quickly and then we can go deeper if you want. Plan, you need to have a plan of what your KPIs are, how you're going to hit your targets, what you're actually going to achieve over the year. You need a method of how to attract clients to your business. So that's about marketing. You then need a method of converting them into high paying customers. So we look at sales psychology and the sales cycle, how you get people over the line. You then need to be able to deliver the right way, both on site and off site. And then you need to learn how to scale, bring the right people on board, the right systems and processes to take it to, wherever you want to get to, 5 or 10 million. So that was the 5-step framework that I now use, which isn't actually in my book, but the book's got a different methodology that worked to get me to the level at the time. But
the book touches on some of those things, but you've refined it over time. That's super interesting. I'd like to hit on the last one, which is the people. I think that's I don't know if it's the hardest, but sometimes it feels the most out of control. What would, you talked about that at the beginning. What are some of the things that, are super important for someone? Obviously, you've got to have the other 4 steps in front to make someone even want to come on board with you. But what are those things that really make the difference for hiring?
Yeah, sure. So, I think you first touched on it. The first question is, why would anyone want to come and work for you in the first place? So you've got to be able to attract the right sort of talent to your business. So people look at you and think, this company's going somewhere. This is a professional outfit. A lot of people, when they're trying to hire, they're thinking, what can this person do for me? But you've got to flip it the other way around and think like, what am I going to do for this person? Why would this person want to come over to me in the first place? So we've got to make sure that you're looking right online. Something that some of our clients do, which I think is awesome, is they'll put a little video on their website, which is just for hiring. And it will be a little 2 to 3 minute video with some of their staff talking about their values and what they appreciate about the company. And that works really well, because it's all right you doing a video about what you're looking for and what your values are. But when your people say it instead, it's more believable, more real. So that's quite cool. So the first thing is you've got to learn how to attract the right person. So look the part. You've then got to be really clever on your job adverts to make sure that your adverts are looking different to anyone else's out there. So again, don't make it all about you. Make it about the person. How can this person progress in the role? What makes you different? And then once you've got the attraction side, this is where we really use AI to leverage this step. You want to get first of all, you're going to use AI to write up the job description and whatever else and match it to your values and culture. Then you're going to get all those CVs that have come in. You're going to throw that into AI and get them to analyze all the CVs and then score it on where people are at. Are they matching your job description and values? And then once you've got the top 3 CVs potentially, you're then going to ask AI to come up with all the interview questions specifically for this person. You're then going to have the interview, make sure AI is on the interview and transcribing it fully, so that you can then take that transcript after, and then you then ask AI to analyze all those interviews and who's now matching what they said in their CV and matching your job description and values, and it will score them again. And from there, you can really make a decision on, who's going to be the best person to come on board. And what I would then do, which is really important, this is something that we missed when we failed as a business, is make sure you phone the referees and the references that are on the CV. Sometimes you're such in a rush to hire, or you don't get hold of the person, the referee, like that, you ignore that bit. But that is an absolutely crucial step to verify that this person, because some people can just interview amazingly well, which we've experienced, but actually there's a reason why
they're all drinking in their car.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So just verify who you're getting is who they say they are. And then once you've brought them on board, the real key, which a lot of businesses miss, is they don't have a proper onboarding process for people. So make sure that that job description has got KPIs on it, like what are they being measured against? And then have an onboarding process. We call it a 30, 60, 90-day onboarding process. So we just get their job description and we split that job description tasks down into where do we expect you to be at 30 days? What should you be doing at 60 days? And by 90 days, you should be really pretty much fully proficient in that whole job role. And what that does, when you have an onboarding process like that, the employee comes on board and sees that and they know what they're being measured against. But it gives you an opportunity every 30 days when they first start to actually stop and have an honest conversation and say, look, Greg, you're doing great at these areas and you're 10 out of 10 at these, but like we really expected you to nail this by now. What are you struggling with? And what it will reveal is either they're not being trained the right way, or you haven't given them access to a certain software or system, which means they can't do that part of the job right. So it may be something that you're doing wrong, or it'll be that they're not right, and you need to, make a decision early on that, I can't invest any more time in this person. They're clearly not right for this business. So I think if you can do those areas, attract them the right way, really vet them on the interview process and the referees, but then onboard them correctly, which is, I think, the bit that most miss. I think you're on for a real chance of success with the people you're bringing on board.
One of the things that I got from Next Level Growth and their system, shout out to Dan Manton, our coach, he talks about, instead of saying a performance review at 30, 60, 90 days, they call them calibration sessions. So you both fill out what is the expectations, right? So you have like kind of a table, the employee fills it out, you fill it out, and then you come together and you calibrate and you match. All right, you thought you were a 95 there. I actually think you're an 80 there, and here's why. Or I think that you're a 95 and you thought you're a 75. All right, well, clearly I'm not, matching, right? And so it's a great way to take it from, all right, here we're going to go into the principal's office to, okay, let's just get aligned here. And that's what this is about. So really valuable there. When it comes to setting KPIs for team members, so it's funny because I'm actually working through that right now with my team, setting KPIs, setting metrics, all of that. And it's not something we've done previously. What is some advice you give for people? And you can apply it directly to the trades, but what's some advice you would apply to someone? And maybe you can pick some specific person and we can talk through what their metrics and KPIs would be.
Yeah, so with KPIs, so this aligns that there's another great book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And one thing they talk about in Traction is making sure that someone actually has responsibility for a task and that they take the ownership of those tasks in the business. So whatever that's going to be, if you're going to bring a salesperson on board, they are responsible for bringing on a certain amount of sales, and it's not diluted across other members. So let's take, for example, maybe a project manager is probably an easiest one that transfers across many industries. You've got to decide what is that project manager responsible for. So the KPIs might be, we need to finish our projects on time, or we need to have no more of an overrun than whatever it is, 5%, whatever you're going to set that KPI at. We need the projects to come in on budget, or a variation of that budget, whatever you're going to allow. You might need variations signed off. They might need to manage the cash flow. There's tons of KPIs that potentially could be there. Sometimes one of the dangers of KPIs though, is that you can load people up too much and you're expecting a unicorn to come in. Sometimes we see this with people just when they do their first hire, like the first hire is normally like a VA or an admin member, and they will give this admin member, because especially when it's the first hire, they think, all right, I can now offload all this stuff. They go, right, well, you're responsible for the bookkeeping, all the social media, all the admin, and actually you've given 3 full-time roles to one VA that might have an element of understanding a few of those areas, but now you're expecting them to be responsible for all of that, and then you assign KPIs, and it's just destined to fail. So you've got to be realistic in what you're expecting of people.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I think when you actually lay them out too, you're like, oh, this is actually, a ton. I mean, we think as business owners, well, I've been doing it all, so obviously they can do it, but you probably were spending more than 8 hours on it, as you went through all of the motions there. Really interesting. What's something that we haven't talked about that you wish we could talk about, or that you really think would make a difference for people here?
Maybe to talk a little bit about marketing in construction and where I think people need to go with marketing, just because I think that aligns with your audience a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive in.
Potentially they could go there. So I think one of the biggest problems we see with builders and trades is with the marketing that, obviously you've got a few different types of marketing. You've got like your inbound marketing where you're waiting for that phone to ring or waiting for that email to come through, and you might be doing all sorts there on social media or ads to gather that. But we are massive believers in outbound marketing and going after the clients that you want, especially in construction, where you don't want all projects, but there might be certain projects where you think, I would love to be tendering for that, or I'd love to connect with this person. And where a lot of builders or contractors make a mistake is that they often misunderstand who their client is. So they might think my client is the homeowner, which, it is to some degree, they're paying you. But from a marketing perspective, they're not the client you want to be going for. The actual client that we encourage builders to go for is actually the architects, because the architects are the one that are sitting on, tens of these projects. They've got these projects sitting on their desk at all times. And if you want the larger projects, no homeowner goes to the builder directly to start. It always starts with the architect to design it, get it through planning and regulations and stuff before it even can, sit on a builder's desk to price. So we shifted the marketing strategy around, and now we go for architects directly, which has been an absolute game changer for a lot of the builders that we coach, or we just give that advice to for free. Understand who is actually your ideal client and then go for them. Don't wait for them to contact you. You actually go for them and approach them. And then we do a little warm-up strategy with them where we will warm them up on social media. So we'll follow them for a bit.
The architects.
The architect, yeah. We'll get on their radar. Say they're on LinkedIn posting a lot. You might follow them, comment, like their posts. So they think, who's this builder it's not my mum giving me a like, it's some builder, who is this guy? And so you get on their radar, then you approach them directly with a message and say, hey, I noticed you've got this project on at 123 Smith Street. We would love to tender for that. That's exactly what we do. Maybe send them follow-up emails, and then we follow that up with a phone call just to get the meeting in place. And we find that if you can do those three things, you've got much more of a chance of being invited to tender for those projects. And when you keep doing that scale, it can really snowball. And the reality is most builders could probably only handle 5 architects that are sending them regular work. But when you keep doing this, all of a sudden you're literally picking the cream jobs that you want to tender for. So
that's so good. So many different analogies or things kind of coalescing here as we're talking. Alex Hormozy has this reel around, like, when he was back in the fraternity, he was just going on dates all the time, and someone was complaining, like, I can't find someone, or you'll never find someone, because Alex listed off his whole list of standards that he had for this woman, and they're like, oh, you're never going to find that woman. And he's like, I only need to find one. And he's obviously found her. But it's the same way with, like, an architect, or if you're in another trades business, a realtor, direct to homeowners, you just need to find a few. You might even only need to find one, right? That keeps funneling you work. And there's so much power in that. I just was on a podcast recording earlier today, and the guy was talking about taking donuts in. He was in the demolition space, and he takes donuts in. So it's like kind of meshing these messages. Everybody's saying the same thing. Create, find those people, figure out who you want to go to, and then, LinkedIn, social media, phone call, email, maybe drop by with donuts. Like, there's so many different things that you can do to warm up that person and create that human connection.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I've got a friend who did exactly the same thing here in Sydney. He come over with no work and built his whole business off Krispy Kreme donuts. This year, he said he'd run out of work again, and he said he'd upped his game, and now he's bringing bottles of gin. He had these little gin hampers that went into the architects, which I think they preferred. But it's crazy how something small like that, you spend, $100, $200, whatever it is, but for the value that you're getting from that, it's a no-brainer. So yeah, and I think what you've touched on there is really important too, is that some people, when they're thinking about marketing, we think about the digital side, and it's all right, let me set up these automated email campaigns and let me do this on automation. But actually, the human connection is the most powerful marketing you can have. So actually dropping in to see someone or talking to someone directly, I think the old school method is more powerful than any of the other stuff.
Well, you're cutting through all the crap too, right? Like, at the end of the day, no matter what marketing you're doing, you're ultimately hoping to get a hold of the person. I mean, agentic crawlers are going to change that a little bit maybe, but ultimately most of our buyers still remain the humans on the other end of the line, or the social media or the phone or whatever. And if you can just cut through all the noise, send them a letter, drop in and give them something that, everybody loves to eat. Everybody loves a little gin here and there, right? There's a huge benefit to that. Love that. That's huge. I think going to the source is huge. I mean, that's essentially what you're saying there. Just like go to the source and, reap the benefits. Take a few drops out of their downpour.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the other things just to mention here, that probably at the same time as well, a lot of mistakes people make as they're trying to scale, and I guess this would transfer across industries, is as they're scaling, a lot of people will just take on the same types of work and just do more volume. So that, a builder might say, right, I specialize in 100K projects. I want to get to £1 million, so I'm going to do 10 of those projects a year. And then when he wants to get to 2 million, he go, right, now I need 20 of these projects. We've just found that as you scale, especially in construction, you need to level up the value and the type of projects that you're getting. It's so much easier for a £2 million builder to have £2 million projects than 20 £100,000 projects. It's just can scale faster. You're not dealing, because one of the big problems in any business is it's not necessarily delivering the work. The work can be the easy bit. The challenging bit is navigating the clients and the emotions around project delivery. So the more clients you have, the more problems you're going to have in that area. Not saying you want to put all your eggs in one basket. We don't believe that. But at the same time, you've got to level up the value of projects and the type of projects just to make your scaling easier.
Bigger clients, bigger, you still have the same toughness to sell, the same hurdle to sell, £1 million as it is £500,000 or dollars, right? And it's the same, it's half the number of people you have to talk to.
Exactly.
Half the number of clients to keep happy.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Wow. Greg, a ton of really good info in here. Where can people find you to kind of see more about what you're up to, the book, all of that stuff?
Yeah, so you can get my book on Amazon, Building Your Future. We actually give it away for free on the website if you want a digital copy of that. We're just really interested in builders getting ahead. So if you go onto the website, developcoaching.com, you can grab a copy of that. I'm on social media, just Google Greg Wilkes, I'll come up. But yeah, we've got tons of sort of free trainings. We just want to help builders get some knowledge that I didn't have when I failed, and I wish I had have got. So yeah, we feel, as Alex Hormozy and all the others say, give it all away, because if they realize all the free stuff is that good, then maybe they want to work with you and do something else later on. So there's plenty there. In fact, we had one builder who he was at 100K, he got to £1 million just from all our free stuff, which is incredible. So yeah, just go and consume it and learn what you can.
Well, and I think for every episode, I say, go back and find some nuggets, go take some action here. But I do have a couple final questions here. I just made a post on social media actually today, and you mentioned, this ties into something you mentioned earlier in the episode about, just pouring through all the books, reading the books, and kind of figuring out what you were missing. What's like a couple, 3, 4 books that you would recommend for entrepreneurs to read? Obviously, your book, Build Your Future. But, out of those books, what really stood out as ones that you would go back to or continue to recommend to people?
Yeah, so one of the first ones is Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Really awesome book, because I just think most people that want to scale, that they're often doing it all themselves, and you really need to learn the value of your own time. And then it's not just understand the value of your time, but how do you then hire people? Like, what's the right person to bring on board first, and how do you hand off your tasks? And he's just got some awesome frameworks and methods around that. So that would be probably the top one, Buy Back Your Time. I loved mindset. I love Tony Robbins for mindset and getting a bit of motivation. So Unleash the Power Within, I think, is awesome to give yourself a bit of a kick and get yourself going. And then, other business books. I think there's a great one by Zappos, which was all about culture. And
what was that? Finding Happy?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That was really awesome. Yeah, loads. Good to Great by Jim Collins, another great book. Traction, as I mentioned earlier, Gino Wickman. Yeah, there's plenty of books. There's
lots of books. Do you still read quite a lot?
Do you know what? No, I don't actually. I used to read business books all the time. That's all I'd ever have on my Kindle and next to my bed. And I've shifted a little bit now. So now I listen to a lot of podcasts. I find I probably get a little bit more out of podcasts and a little bit more condensed. So I love podcasts on YouTube. So I'm a little bit obsessed with that at the moment. And
I think eventually you can get a little bit too many business books in your head. And if you can go to autobiographies or podcasts, there's sometimes more like meaty nuggets that you can take.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love autobiographies, but I haven't really come across one recently that's been great. I'll talk about another book that I think is amazing is Shoe Dog. By Bill Knight, I think it was. That was an incredible autobiography. I love those sort of books. So yeah, no, not reading so many books anymore. Now, mainly it's just a nice little story before bed, like a sci-fi book or something, which I enjoy.
What podcasts are you into nowadays?
I'm mainly a health and fitness podcast at the minute. So yeah, I've got a load of them that I follow. But if I was listening to some business ones, it would be Diary of a CEO. I quite like his stuff. He's pretty cool.
He has some good stuff for sure.
And Alex Hormozy is pretty good. And again, Dan Martell's got some great podcasts. Love the AI podcast as well at the minute. There's one called AI Advantage, which I think is great. And I'm just really trying to stay on top of all the latest AI news and tools.
You got to stick with the podcasts on those because the books are going to be outdated by the time they come out, right?
Yeah. Actually, probably the best podcast, I'll tell you the one I am obsessed with, is Peter Diamandis. He's got I'm literally waiting for that episode to drop every week. So Peter Diamandis is the one who hosts the X Prize with Elon Musk.
Okay.
And their AI podcast he's got a co-host on there, Dave Blunden. They are so on top of what's coming out, and they've got links with so many sort of government and in like some of the top companies around the world, like Intel and ones like that. They're really all over what's coming and what's happening and where America might be lagging behind compared to China. And it's absolutely fascinating. So yeah, if you're into AI and the future of tech and health and all that stuff, that's the one to watch.
Wild. I'll add that to my list for sure. Definitely find that. Peter Diamandis.
Moonshots, I think he calls the podcast, but yeah, Peter Diamandis, Moonshots.
Oh, does he have a book by the same name?
He might do, yeah. I think he's got like 4 or 5 books. But yes, he probably does it.
Interesting. That's the connection that I have there. This was awesome, Greg. Appreciate the chat. Again, just really encouraging people to pick one thing to go back and do. We talked about a lot of information. We talked about books that you could go read, podcasts you could listen to. We could talk about, all the different things you got to sort out. But if you could distill it down to one thing that you see make the most difference for the people that you coach, the people that you help, what would be that like one, hinge, the tiny hinge that moves the big doors?
Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't really touch on this too much, but I think the biggest thing is to have a proper plan in place and really map out the strategy of what you want over the next year, what you want in your life. I think so many people just go through business and life without actually having a concrete plan or goal of what they want to achieve. So that's the first pillar, plan, for us, and for a reason, because we feel it's the most important. So yeah, take your time, map it out. I do it every December. At the end of the year, I'm doing a full map out of how I want the year to go. I stick it on my wall, and funny enough, you might not look at it for a while, but then you look at it again in a few months and think, actually, I've subconsciously it's there. Yeah, you're actually getting through it. So yeah, that's the number one. Have a plan and go for it.
Have a plan, work the plan. So if you're listening, gotten this far, pull out a notepad, start jotting down some notes, and plan some ways that you're going to take this episode and rock with it. Greg Wilkes, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you dropping the information here for people. We'll wrap up with that, folks, and we will see you on the next one. Talk soon.
Thanks, Lewis.